Hello, it's your internet dad again, sharing life experiences that I offered my own sons in the hope that they may be useful to you. If you like the series, don't forget to become a subscriber. They come out twice a week on a whole raft of different subjects. Today's subject is entitled Confirmation Bias and a Grizzly Bear. The subtitle is Wishful Thinking Can Get You Into a Lot of Trouble. I want to talk about the phenomenon of confirmation bias. This is something that applies to you not just in adolescence, but the rest of your life. It's a very human sentiment that tends to selectively ignore bad news and grasp good news that conforms to what your particular bias is. Now, in my one of my other videos entitled Fishing with Hand Grenades, I argued for you to think outside the box. Just because you're doing something very successfully for a long period of time doesn't mean to say that's the only way of doing it. So give it a thought to maybe trying to do it in a better way. Confirmation bias is different from that. It involves a situation whereby you are already embarked on a course of action, such as choosing your major at college, choosing your career, starting a business venture, or working with friends on some project. If you start getting signals that this is not the correct course of action, you should put your pride and ego aside and think about the whole thing again. Many years ago, I was in Glacier National Park, hiking with one of my sons. In the hotel where we stayed and in the diner and various other places that we visited prior to our hike, there was a lot of talk we overheard from the tourists about what to do if they met a grizzly bear. Now, we were experienced wilderness campers. We were going to do this not in a recreational vehicle, but with a backpack and tent. So we reckoned that their likelihood of meeting a grizzly bear was probably slightly less than if they met a Martian from another planet. We believed that a lot of these stories were exaggerated, and we didn't take them too seriously. Now, we did obey the rules of wilderness camping, and so should you. We were very careful not to drop food on the ground while cooking, and every night we wrapped up all our food in a poncho, tied it to a 30-foot rope which we threw over the fork of a tree, and hauled it up out of reach of unwelcome visitors. Now, the other issue that we had been given in the safety briefing was not to camp on the sides of streams. We thought maybe that was an environmental consideration, don't dirty up the beautiful atmosphere, but we found that in many areas the brush was so dense that the only place to camp was alongside a stream. We later learned, of course, that the brush is dense for everything, humans and animals, and that the bear, a nocturnal creature mostly, uses stream beds to move around at night, and that's the real reason for the ban. Now, after we'd camped, we noticed on the sand, on the stream bank, was the imprint of a grizzly bear paw. And it's very easy to identify if you've done your research, because the claws are very much longer and thinner than they are with other bears. We thought it interesting, but didn't give it much more thought. But that was clue number one. Towards the end of the evening, at last light, I used to always go round the campsite checking on the food being secure, guy ropes are correct, etc. And I found a strange thing. I found body parts lying on the ground covered with brush. Looked like deer body parts, but they didn't have a smell and there were no black flies on them, so I suspected that they were a recent kill. I wondered at the time, who on earth would do such a thing? That was clue number two. Finally, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard the sound of two men crossing the stream, and they came to the tent. Now you might ask yourself, what on earth were two men doing walking around in the dark in a wilderness area? Well, of course they weren't men at all. It was the grizzly bear. He of the claws, he of the dead deer parts, and now he's at the tent. He circled the tent once or twice, came up to the zipped flap of the entrance, sniffed it, but made no attempt to enter. After a few minutes, he shuffled off, probably to his larder, and we didn't hear any more of him for the rest of the night. Now the question you could ask is, why on earth could two intelligent individuals faced with all these clues still persist in the idea that it was extremely unlikely they would meet a grizzly bear? Well, that's the classic definition of confirmation bias. We were biased in favor of the thought that bear stories were just scary for tourists, and it didn't apply to us. So, if you yourself are on a journey in a business transaction or deciding on your future, and you keep getting these signals or doubts, you owe it to yourself to take a second look. Put your ego and your pride aside and do a brutal examination as to whether this is the right course of action for you to continue to do. Get rid of those biases. Look at it coldly and factually. If, on review, everything looks good, then go full speed ahead. But if those doubts have begun to pile up and they really argue for a different course of action, then obey those items that you see before your very eyes and change the course of action. Now, you're unlikely to dodge that grizzly bear in the process, but you will probably have a much better result of your new project and your new direction. Remember, if you have a friend who's digging themselves into a deep hole, for goodness sake, give him the link. It may help him, and it can certainly help you. So good luck on your decisions, and beware of that bias. Till next time.